I've worked hundreds of night shifts in my life. I'm not a man who scares easy. But there's one night, one specific Tuesday in November, that I still can't talk about without my hands going cold. And I mean that literally. It was 2009. I was 43 years old, and I'd been a night security supervisor at Millbrook Cold Storage out in rural Indiana for going on 12 years. The place was a massive commercial freezer warehouse, the kind that stores meat and dairy products for regional grocery chains. 300,000 square feet of concrete floor, loading docks, industrial freezer units, and long hallways that went on so far you couldn't see the end of them from the middle. The night crew was usually just me and a guy named Dennis. Dennis handled the loading dock paperwork while I did the interior rounds. That Tuesday, Dennis called in sick. Management said it wasn't worth calling someone in for a single night. I'd be alone until 6 a.m. I didn't think anything of it. I'd worked solo plenty of times. I signed in at 10 p.m., poured a cup of coffee from the machine by the break room, and started my first walkthrough. The place felt the way it always felt on quiet nights. Just the low hum of the refrigeration units, the occasional knock of metal pipes contracting in the cold, and the sound of my own boots on the floor. I'd stopped hearing those things years ago. You tune them out, it becomes white noise. My first round took 40 minutes. Nothing unusual. I came back to the security booth, logged my check-in, and settled in to watch the camera monitors. That's when the first thing happened. Camera 7 covers the east hallway, a long corridor between freezer units C and D. At 10:52 p.m., the motion sensor in that hallway triggered. I watched the monitor. The hallway was empty. I zoomed in. Nothing. Just flat concrete floor and fluorescent light. I reset the sensor, logged it as a malfunction, and went back to my coffee. At 11:15 p.m., it triggered again. Same hallway, same empty corridor. But this time, when I looked at the monitor, I noticed something I hadn't the first time. The overhead light at the far end of the hallway, maybe 200 feet out, was flickering. Not the fast flicker you get from a ballast. Slow, deliberate, like something passing in front of it. I grabbed my flashlight and went to check. The hallway was empty. The light had stopped flickering by the time I got there. I stood at one end and looked down that corridor for a full minute. Nothing moved. I could hear the freezer units on either side, feel the cold seeping out from under the heavy insulated doors. I checked both doors, both sealed, both locked. I went back to the booth. At 11:48 p.m., the phone on my desk rang. The internal line, the one that connected to different stations throughout the building. Break rooms, the dock office, the manager's suite on the second floor. I picked it up. Security. Silence. Not dial tone. Not static. Just open silence. Like someone holding the receiver on the other end without speaking. Hello? The line went dead. I called up to the dock office, the break room, the manager's suite. All empty. All dark on camera. I checked the call log on the security system. It showed an incoming call from extension 214. Extension 214 was the loading dock office, where Dennis would have been if he hadn't called in sick. I went back to watch the cameras. At 12:30 a.m., I noticed something on camera 3. Camera 3 covers the main corridor, the one that runs north to south down the center of the building. I'd walked that corridor myself 90 minutes earlier. At the far south end of the corridor, right at the edge of what the camera could see, there was a shape. I leaned in close to the monitor. It looked like a person standing at the end of the hallway, just standing there, facing the camera. I blinked. I rubbed my eyes. I zoomed in. The shape was gone. I sat there for a long moment, telling myself it was shadows, telling myself I'd been staring at monitors for 2 hours and my eyes were playing tricks. I got up, poured the rest of my coffee down the sink, and splashed cold water on my face. When I came back to the monitors, everything looked normal. I picked up my radio, clipped it to my belt, and headed south. Here's the thing about that building that I should explain. It was old, built in the late 1950s, expanded twice, and pieces of it didn't quite match up. There was a section in the south end. We just called it the old wing. That hadn't been in active use for 2 years. The company was in the middle of deciding whether to renovate it or seal it off permanently. In the meantime, it sat, locked, dark. And because the refrigeration units in that section had been decommissioned, it was actually warmer in there than the rest of the building, which always struck me as strange. Like something living was in there, giving off heat. I had a key to the old wing. Part of my rounds was a weekly check of the perimeter doors. But I hadn't been inside the wing itself in months. When I reached the south end of the main corridor, I stopped. The door to the old wing was open, not all the way, maybe 6 inches, but it was open. I had personally checked that door at the start of my shift. It had been locked. I stood outside it for a moment. I could feel warm air coming through the gap, which was wrong and familiar at the same time. I pushed the door the rest of the way open and shone my flashlight inside. The old wing hallway stretched out ahead of me, rows of decommissioned freezer units on both sides. My flashlight beam reached about 30 feet before the darkness swallowed it, and at the edge of that darkness, just barely at the edge, something moved. Not a full shape, not a person, just movement, like something stepping back out of the light. I am not a man who runs. I want to be clear about that. I stepped back. I pulled the door shut. I heard the latch click. I stood there with my hand on the door handle and I breathed. And then, from the other side of that door, I heard footsteps, slow, even footsteps, moving away from me. Down the length of that darkened hallway, away from the door, getting quieter with each step. 12 steps, maybe 15, and then nothing. I stood there for 3 full minutes. I did not open the door. When I got back to the security booth, I pulled up the camera coverage. For the old wing, there were 2 cameras still active in there. The company had never bothered removing them. Both showed empty hallways. Both showed no movement. But on camera 11, the one at the far end of the old wing, the timestamp was wrong. It was frozen. The counter had stopped at 11:03 p.m., nearly 2 hours earlier, like it had been frozen at that exact moment and nothing recorded after that. I called my manager, got his voicemail, called the emergency line. Got a different voicemail. I sat in that booth for the remaining 5 hours of my shift with every light in the building I could reach turned on, and I did not move until I heard the day crew's truck pull into the lot at 5:50 a.m. The company sent a maintenance crew to check the old wing the next afternoon. They found the door I had shut still locked. No signs of forced entry on any perimeter door. They found nothing inside. No evidence of anyone having been in there. They replaced camera 11, which they said had experienced a power issue. The IT guy told me that kind of freeze can happen with older equipment. I handed in my resignation that week. 12 years. I just walked away. People ask me sometimes why I left a steady job I'd had for over a decade. Good pay. Good hours for a night person like me. I always say it was time for a change. But that's not the truth. The truth is this. On my last day, when I was cleaning out my locker, I found my key to the old wing sitting on the top shelf. I had never put it there. I keep my keys on a clip on my belt loop. Always have. And the key was cold. Colder than anything else in that locker. colder than it had any reason to be. Some places, I think, hold on to things. Things that don't have names. Things that don't show up on cameras. I don't know what was in that building with me that night. I'm not sure I want to, but I'll tell you what I do know. I drove past Millbrook Cold Storage 2 years ago, just passing through. The building is still there. The lights were on. And as I slowed down, I don't know why I slowed down, I could see the south end of the building, the old wing. The window at the far end had a shape standing in it. I didn't slow down again. So, do you believe this story is true? Drop your answer in the comments, because I'll tell you what, I've never told the full version of this to anyone before, and I'm still not sure I should have.